At 2:47 a.m., a billionaire was about to storm out of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, taking his $50 million deal with him. Hotel management was panicking. The translator had failed. The cultural protocols were a disaster. Everything was falling apart. Then the cleaning lady opened her mouth. What came out shocked everyone in that marble lobby. Perfect Mandarin. Flawless pronunciation. Business terminology that made the billionaire's eyes widen in disbelief. In less than 60 seconds, she had saved a deal that 20 executives couldn't fix. But here's what nobody knew. This wasn't luck. This woman had been hiding a secret for 3 years. A secret so extraordinary that when the truth finally came out, it would expose the hotel's biggest blind spot and change everything about how they saw their own employees. Have you ever been completely wrong about someone based on their uniform? Let's rewind 30 minutes. The Grand Metropolitan's marble lobby gleamed under soft lighting, empty except for the rhythmic sound of a cleaning cart's squeaky wheel. Kenya Williams methodically mopped the floors, earbuds in, quietly practicing Mandarin pronunciation from her language app. The industrial-strength cleaner, mixed with lingering traces of expensive cologne, created an odd cocktail of scents that defined her world. At 28, Kenya had perfected the art of invisibility. 3 years of night shifts had taught her to move like a ghost through spaces designed for people who would never see her as anything more than part of the furniture. Tonight felt no different as she worked around the imported marble columns, her reflection barely registering in the polished surfaces. Then the elevator chimed. Mr. Chen Wei emerged like a storm cloud, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid, furious Mandarin. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings as he paced the lobby, gesturing wildly at invisible adversaries. Kenya's hands froze on her mop handle. She understood every word. He was livid about the botched catering arrangements for tomorrow's conference. The hotel staff had ordered pork dishes for a gathering that included Muslim investors. They'd arranged the meeting room facing west, which violated feng shui principles important to his partners. Worst of all, they'd scheduled presentations during prayer times without consulting anyone. "These people have no respect," he said in Mandarin, his voice cracking with frustration. $50 million, and they treat us like we're invisible. I should take the entire conference to the Ritz-Carlton tomorrow. Kenya's cart stopped moving entirely. She watched this powerful man pace like a caged animal, knowing she could solve every problem he'd mentioned. But the invisible barrier of her uniform felt as solid as the marble beneath her feet. The elevator chimed again. Hotel management would arrive soon to handle the situation. They would apologize, make excuses, and likely make everything worse with their cultural ignorance. Kenya looked at her reflection in the nearest mirror, seeing both her cleaning uniform and something else flickering behind her eyes. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. What she did next would either cost her the job she desperately needed or change her life forever. Kenya's hands trembled as she pulled out her earbuds. Her heart hammered against her ribs so loudly she was certain it would echo through the marble lobby. For 3 years, she had rehearsed this moment in her mind during countless lonely nights, but she never believed it would actually happen. Her footsteps seemed impossibly loud as she approached Mr. Chen, each click of her worn sneakers against the polished floor announcing her presence. He continued pacing, phone pressed to his ear, completely unaware that salvation was walking toward him in a hotel cleaning uniform. "Xiansheng, Qingwen wo neng bangju nin ma." The words hung in the air like a revelation. "Sir, may I help you?" Mr. Chen froze mid-stride. His phone slowly lowered from his ear as he turned to face the source of perfect Mandarin spoken with a flawless Beijing accent. His eyes widened, searching Kenya's face as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. A cleaning lady had just addressed him in his native language with the formal respect typically reserved for high-level business meetings. "Nin shuo zhongwen?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You speak Chinese?" "Shi de, wo shuo zhongwen," Kenya replied, her voice gaining strength with each syllable. "Wo ting dao nin dui hui yi anpai de dan yu." 我想我可以帮助解决这些文化方面的问题. Yes, I speak Chinese. I heard your concerns about the conference arrangements. I think I can help resolve these cultural issues. The transformation in Mr. Chen's posture was immediate. His shoulders relaxed, the tension in his face melted away, and for the first time since emerging from the elevator, he smiled. But it wasn't just relief. It was recognition. The kind of recognition that happens when one person realizes they're speaking to an intellectual equal. Kenya continued in fluent Mandarin, explaining that she had overheard his frustrations about the catering arrangements and the meeting room setup. She suggested specific solutions, kosher and halal-certified catering options that would respect all attendees, repositioning the main conference table to face east according to feng shui principles, and rescheduling the afternoon sessions to accommodate prayer times. 您是做什么工作的? Mr. Chen asked, though his eyes had already taken in her uniform. What do you do for work? Before Kenya could answer, the sharp staccato of high heels announced Stephanie Martinez's arrival. The assistant manager burst through the stairwell door, her face flushed from running, her blazer slightly askew. She had been monitoring the security cameras and had seen the situation developing in the lobby. Kenya! Stephanie's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. What are you doing bothering our guest? The word bothering hit Kenya like a physical blow. In an instant, she was reminded of her place in the hotel's hierarchy, of the invisible barrier that her momentary confidence had dared to cross. She took a step back, her eyes dropping to the marble floor. But Mr. Chen did something unexpected. He turned to face Stephanie directly, his voice firm but polite, as he switched to English. This young woman was not bothering me. She was providing exceptional customer service. In fact, she was solving problems that apparently no one else on your staff was able to address. Stephanie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked between Mr. Chen and Kenya, trying to process what she was witnessing. I apologize if there was any confusion, Mr. Chen. Kenya is part of our cleaning staff, and she should be focusing on her assigned duties. Her assigned duties? Mr. Chen's eyebrows rose. Perhaps her talents are being underutilized. The lobby fell silent except for the soft jazz playing through the hidden speakers. Kenya stood between two worlds, the one where she was invisible, and the one where her mind was finally seen. Chen's respect felt like sunlight after years of shadow, but Stephanie's disapproving glare reminded her of the reality she faced every day. Kenya, Stephanie said, her voice tight with barely controlled authority. Please return to your work area. I'll handle our guests' concerns from here. Mr. Chen looked at Kenya with something that might have been sympathy or perhaps admiration. Ziexianin de Bangzhu, he said quietly. Thank you for your help. Kenya nodded, her brief moment of recognition already fading back into invisibility. As she walked back to her cleaning cart, she heard Stephanie launch into a series of apologies and explanations that would likely make the cultural problems worse, not better. But something had changed in those few minutes. Chen now knew that exceptional capability existed behind a cleaning uniform, and Kenya had tasted what it felt like to be seen for who she really was. The question was, what would happen next? As Kenya pushed her cart back toward the service elevator, the familiar weight of invisibility settled over her like a heavy coat. But for those few precious minutes, she had felt something she hadn't experienced in years: intellectual respect. The memory triggered a flood of what she had lost. The smell of old books and coffee. That's what hit her first as the memories came rushing back. Columbia University's East Asian Studies Library, where she had spent countless hours perfecting her pronunciation of Mandarin tones. She could still feel the worn leather of her favorite chair in the linguistics lab, still hear the excited chatter of international students practicing conversation circles. PhD candidate Kenya Williams had been destined for greatness. Top of her applied linguistics program, specializing in East Asian languages and international business communication. Her professors called her a prodigy, She spoke 7 languages fluently and had been offered research positions in Beijing and Tokyo. The academic world was her oyster. Then life exploded. Her mother's lupus diagnosis came first, the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. Then her father's construction accident, a fall that shattered more than just his spine. It crushed the family's financial stability. Kenya watched her parents' savings disappear into a black hole of medical debt and disability lawyers. The choice was brutal in its simplicity: continue her education while her family lost their home, or sacrifice her dreams to save them. The day she walked out of her advisor's office for the last time, Dr. Martinez had begged her to reconsider. "Kenya, you're throwing away a brilliant future," she had said. But brilliant futures don't pay for chemotherapy or wheelchair ramps. Night shift cleaning at the Grand Metropolitan paid $15 an hour. It wasn't much, but it kept her mother's treatments current and slowly chipped away at the mountain of debt. The overnight schedule meant fewer people to witness what she considered her greatest failure: the gap between who she was and who the world saw. Her grandmother's worn English-Chinese dictionary sat in her cleaning cart every night, a tattered reminder of dreams deferred. She kept studying languages during breaks, telling herself it was just a hobby now, not preparation for the life she would never have. But tonight, for just a moment, she had remembered who she used to be, who she still was, underneath the uniform and the shame. The question that haunted her as the elevator doors closed was simple. How long could extraordinary talent remain invisible before it disappeared entirely? 24 hours later, Kenya arrived for her shift to find the Grand Metropolitan in barely controlled chaos. The marble floors gleamed as always, but tension crackled through the air like electricity before a storm. Something was very wrong. Stephanie Martinez paced the lobby in a way that reminded Kenya of Mr. Chen the night before, except instead of dignified frustration, this was pure panic. Sweat beaded on Stephanie's forehead despite the perfectly climate-controlled environment. Her blazer was wrinkled, her usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, frantically making call after call. "No, you don't understand," Stephanie's voice carried across the lobby. "The conference is tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. We can't reschedule 50 international business leaders." Kenya moved quietly through the lobby, emptying trash bins and wiping surfaces, but her ears were tuned to every conversation. The pieces of the disaster slowly came together like fragments of a broken vase. The catering company had canceled after discovering the original order violated multiple religious dietary restrictions. The feng shui consultant had quit when informed that moving the conference room furniture would cost extra. The professional translation service had pulled out after a payment dispute. Mr. Chen's $50 million international business summit was 12 hours away, and nothing was ready. David Harrison, the general manager, emerged from the elevator looking like a man facing execution. His usually crisp shirt was rumpled, his tie loosened in defeat. "Stephanie? What's the latest?" "I've called every catering company in Manhattan. Nobody can handle kosher, halal, and vegetarian requirements with 12 hours' notice. The furniture rental company says repositioning the conference room will take 6 hours minimum. And the backup translation service?" Stephanie's voice cracked. "They want triple the rate for emergency service and they can't guarantee cultural accuracy." Kenya's hands stilled on the marble surface she was cleaning. Every problem Stephanie mentioned was solvable. Not easy, but solvable. She knew 3 kosher catering companies that specialized in multicultural events. She understood feng shui principles well enough to arrange the room properly without expensive consultants. And translation? That was breathing for her. But she also knew her place. The invisible line that separated staff from management. The unspoken rule that cleaning personnel didn't offer business advice. David noticed her nearby and something shifted in his expression. "Kenya," he said carefully, "didn't you speak with Mr. Chen last night?" Stephanie's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "David, please don't tell me you're thinking—" "I'm thinking," David interrupted. that we're about to lose the biggest client this hotel has ever had, and Pride isn't going to pay our salaries." The lobby fell silent except for the soft jazz and the distant hum of the city beyond the windows. Kenya felt the weight of both their stares, David's desperate hope and Stephanie's skeptical resistance. "Kenya," David continued, his voice gentler now, "do you know anything about Chinese business customs? Anything that might help us?" Kenya's heart was hammered. She could feel Stephanie's disapproval radiating like heat from a furnace. But she also saw David's genuine desperation, and behind it, the jobs of dozens of hotel employees hanging in the balance. "I might know some things," she said quietly, testing the waters. "Such as?" Stephanie's tone could have frozen the marble floors. Kenya took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Golden Dragon Catering on 47th Street specializes in multicultural events. They can handle kosher, halal, and vegetarian simultaneously. The conference room orientation issue can be solved by rotating the main table 45 degrees and adding plants in the western corners. And for translation," she paused, meeting David's eyes, "I speak fluent Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and Arabic." The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. David stared at Kenya as if seeing her for the first time. Finally, David spoke. "You can really do all that?" But before Kenya could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother's doctor. The next chemotherapy session had been moved up. She was needed at home. Everything was about to get much more complicated. "Absolutely not." Stephanie's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. She had recovered from her initial shock and was now in full damage control mode, but not the kind David had hoped for. "David, we need to talk. Privately." She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the concierge desk, but her voice carried anyway. "We cannot put a cleaning lady in charge of a $50 million international conference. Are you insane?" Kenya continued wiping the marble surface, but every word hit her like a physical blow. She had heard variations of this conversation before, always about her, never to her, as if she were furniture that couldn't understand human speech. "Stephanie, we're out of options," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Kenya could hear the doubt creeping in, the weight of corporate hierarchy pressing down on his desperate hope. "Out of options? David, think about what you're suggesting. She cleans toilets for a living. What happens when she makes a mistake? What happens when these international business leaders ask who she is and we have to tell them our translator is the night janitor? This could destroy the hotel's reputation forever." Kenya's hands stilled on the marble. 3 years of invisible competence, and all Stephanie could see was a toilet brush. "And another thing," Stephanie continued, warming to her theme. "What message does this send to our other employees? That anyone can just step out of their assigned role? We have protocols, David. Hierarchies exist for a reason. You start blurring these lines, and next week every housekeeper will think they can give business advice." David's silence stretched longer with each argument. Kenya could practically hear his resolve crumbling under the weight of corporate logic and social expectations. "Look," Stephanie's voice softened slightly, taking on the tone of someone explaining basic facts to a child. "I'm sure Kenya is very nice. Maybe she picked up some Chinese from TV shows or something. But speaking a few phrases is not the same as professional translation. We're talking about complex business terminology, cultural nuances, and legal implications. This requires real expertise, not amateur enthusiasm." From TV shows. Kenya closed her eyes, feeling the familiar sting of having her 7-year academic journey reduced to casual entertainment consumption. Her PhD research on cross-cultural communication patterns, her fluency in 7 languages, her expertise in international business protocols, all dismissed as amateur enthusiasm. "We'll find another way," David finally said, defeat heavy in his voice. "Call the emergency service again. Offer them whatever they want." Kenya heard their footsteps moving toward the elevator, leaving her alone with her cleaning cart and the crushing weight of systemic dismissal. She looked at her reflection in the polished marble. A woman in a uniform that apparently defined her entire worth in other people's eyes. But then, she noticed something else in the reflection. Mr. Chine, standing by the elevator bank, had heard everything. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on Kenya with an intensity that made her breath catch. He approached slowly, speaking in quiet Mandarin so only she could hear. Zuo tian wan shang ni shuo de hua hen you jian di. Ni zhen de you yu yan xue bo shi xue wei ma? What you said last night was very insightful. Do you really have a PhD in linguistics? Kenya looked around, making sure Stephanie and David were gone, then nodded. Wo Chengjing Shigalunbia Daxue de Bo Shi Ho Xuan Ren. Zhuangong Dongya Yu Yan Xue. I was a PhD candidate at Columbia University, specialized in East Asian linguistics. Mr. Chen's expression shifted from curiosity to something much more determined. 那要明天的会议，我想要你做我的私人翻译，不是酒店安排的，是我要求的。他们无法拒绝客户的特殊要求，对吗？ Then, for tomorrow's conference, I want you as my personal translator, not arranged by the hotel, but requested by me. They can't refuse a client's special request, can they? For the first time in 3 years, Kenya smiled with genuine hope. The game was about to change completely. Conference day arrived like a thunderstorm, inevitable and electric with possibility. The Grand Metropolitan's main floor had been transformed into an international business hub, with flags from 12 countries flanking the entrance, and the soft murmur of multiple languages filling the marble corridors. Kenya arrived at 6 a.m., 3 hours before her usual shift, her stomach churning with a mixture of terror and anticipation. She had spent the night reviewing business terminology in 4 languages and researching each attending delegation's cultural preferences. Her cleaning uniform felt heavier than usual, but today it would serve a different purpose. The emergency translator service had indeed shown up at triple the rate, but 30 minutes before the conference began, disaster struck again. The lead translator called in sick with food poisoning, and his backup was stuck in a subway breakdown between Queens and Manhattan. Stephanie was in full panic mode when Mr. Chine made his announcement. I require my personal cultural consultant to provide translation services for today's proceedings, he told David and Stephanie in the lobby, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Ms. Kenya Williams will serve in this capacity. Mr. Chine, Stephanie started, her voice strained with professional courtesy barely containing panic. I don't think you understand. Kenya is our cleaning staff. She's not qualified for... Are you suggesting, Mr. Chine interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet, that I don't know what qualifications I require for my own business needs? The lobby fell silent. David looked between his most important client and his assistant manager, calculating the cost of each possible decision. Finally, corporate survival instinct won. Of course, Mr. Chine. Whatever you need. And just like that, Kenya Williams was thrust from invisibility into the spotlight of international business. The transformation was immediate and stunning. Within the first hour, Kenya was seamlessly facilitating conversations between Chinese tech executives and Japanese manufacturing partners. Her fluent transitions between languages, creating a bridge that formal translations had failed to build. A Korean delegate, frustrated by previous miscommunications about market entry strategies, found himself genuinely understood for the first time. Finally, he said in Korean, not knowing Kenya could hear him, someone who understands that context matters more than words. Kenya didn't just translate his comment. She provided cultural context that prevented a potential misunderstanding about hierarchical respect in business negotiations. The Japanese executives were particularly impressed when Kenya addressed them using the appropriate levels of formal keigo, showing a deep understanding of business etiquette that went far beyond language mechanics. One executive quietly asked his colleague in Japanese, where did they find someone with such sophisticated cultural knowledge? She studied at Columbia University, Kenya replied in perfect Japanese, causing both men to look at her with newfound respect. But it was her intervention during a critical moment between the Chinese and German delegations that truly showcased her expertise. A German executive had made a comment about efficiency improvements that carried unintended cultural implications in Chinese business philosophy. Instead of translating literally, Kenya diplomatically reframed the concept in terms of collaborative optimization, preserving the German intent while respecting Chinese cultural sensitivities. Mr. Chen watched this exchange with growing satisfaction. He had suspected Kenya's capabilities, but witnessing her prevent a potential cultural crisis in real time confirmed his instincts. Hotel staff began to notice the shift. Other cleaning crew members watched Kenya command respect from international business leaders with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The contrast between her uniform and her obvious expertise created a cognitive dissonance that forced everyone to reconsider their assumptions. Stephanie found herself in the impossible position of watching someone she had dismissed as unqualified, successfully managing the most important event in the hotel's history. By lunch break, 3 different international executives had quietly asked David for Kenya's business card, assuming she was a high-level consultant. The afternoon sessions would prove even more challenging, but Kenya had already achieved something remarkable. She had made extraordinary talent impossible to ignore. The question was no longer whether she belonged in that room, it was whether the room deserved her. During the lunch break, while international delegates networked in the hotel's Skyline restaurant, David Harrison found Kenya in an unexpected place, the rooftop garden, sitting alone among the manicured plants with her grandmother's worn dictionary open in her lap. "Mind if I join you?" David asked, gesturing to the bench beside her. Kenya looked up, startled. In 3 years of working at the hotel, the general manager had never sought her out for a conversation. She closed the dictionary carefully and nodded. David sat down, and for a moment they both stared out at the Manhattan skyline in silence. Finally, he spoke. "I owe you an apology, Kenya. Actually, I owe you more than that." The words hung in the air between them. Kenya had imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, she found herself speechless. "What I witnessed there," David continued, "wasn't just professional competence, it was an extraordinary experience. The kind of cultural intelligence that business schools try to teach but rarely achieve. And I almost let my own prejudices and corporate cowardice prevent me from seeing it." Kenya's throat tightened. After years of invisibility, genuine recognition felt almost too precious to trust. "I've been thinking," David said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "The hotel industry is changing. International business is becoming more complex, more culturally sensitive. We need people who can bridge those gaps authentically. Not just translate words, but translate meaning." He pulled out a business card holder and extracted a crisp, white card. "I'd like to offer you a position as our Director of Cultural Affairs. Full-time salary commensurate with your actual qualifications, not your current role." Kenya stared at the card. Her name was already printed on it. Kenya Williams, Director of Cultural Affairs, Grand Metropolitan Hotel. The sight of her name in elegant typeface, representing her true capabilities, made her eyes blur with tears. You had this printed before you even asked me?" David smiled. "I had it rushed during the morning session. Mr. Chen wasn't the only one who recognized talent when he saw it. The question is, are you interested?" Kenya's mind raced. A real position, recognition, the chance to use her education meaningfully. But reality crept in like cold water. "David, what about Stephanie? What about the other staff? Won't there be complications?" "There will be challenges," David admitted. "Change always creates friction. But this hotel either evolves or gets left behind. And after watching you work today, I realize we've been leaving extraordinary talent behind for years." Kenya looked down at the business card again. The weight of possibility felt both thrilling and terrifying. What would my responsibilities be? Cultural consulting for international clients, training our staff on cross-cultural communication, developing protocols for high-level international events. Essentially, everything you did today, but as an official part of your job instead of an emergency intervention. The rooftop garden fell quiet except for the distant hum of the city below. Kenya thought about her mother's medical bills, her sister's college dreams, the 3 years of invisible nights that had led to this moment. There is one condition, David said carefully. Tonight's dinner presentation with the investors will be the real test. If we can successfully close Mr. Chen's partnership deals, the position is permanent. If not, he didn't need to finish. Kenya understood. Everything hung on the evening's final session. She looked at the business card one more time, then up at David. When do I start? David smiled. You already have. As the afternoon session concluded and delegates prepared for the evening's crucial dinner presentation, Kenya found herself alone in the hotel's quiet chapel, a small sanctuary tucked away on the mezzanine level that most guests never discovered. Her hands trembled as she dialed her mother's number. 3 rings, 4. Then that familiar voice, weakened by medication but still filled with love. Kenya. Baby, you're calling during work. Is everything okay? Kenya closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the day's emotional whiplash. Mama, something incredible is happening. I need to tell you. She poured out the story, the billionaire businessman, the language skills finally being recognized, David's job offer, the business card with her name printed in elegant letters. As she spoke, she heard her mother's breathing change, becoming deeper, more emotional. Lord have mercy, her mother whispered when Kenya finished. Baby, your grandmother would be dancing in heaven right now. The mention of her grandmother broke something open in Kenya's chest. She thought about the woman who had cleaned houses her entire life, who had never learned to read but had saved every penny to buy Kenya that English-Chinese dictionary. The same dictionary that had traveled in Kenya's cleaning cart every night for 3 years. Mama, remember when Grandma used to say that our intelligence was our inheritance? She used to tell you that education was the one thing nobody could take away, her mother replied, her voice thick with tears. Even when we had to take you out of school, she made me promise we'd find a way for you to finish. She never got to see you at Columbia, but baby, she's seeing this. Kenya pulled her grandmother's dictionary from her pocket, running her fingers over the worn cover. 3 generations of dreams lived in that small book. Her grandmother's hope, her mother's sacrifice, and now her own second chance. The doctors say my treatments are working, her mother continued. My numbers are the best they've been in 2 years. And your sister got accepted to 3 more colleges with that scholarship application you helped her write. This family is healing, Kenya. All of us. Through the chapel's stained glass windows, the late afternoon sun painted colored patterns on the walls. Kenya felt something shift inside her, not just hope, but a deep sense of purpose that went beyond personal success. Tonight's the final test, Mama. If I can help close these business deals, the job is mine permanently. Then you show them what Williams women are made of, her mother said fiercely. You carry all of us with you into that room. Your grandmother's dreams, my pride, your sister's future. You're not just fighting for yourself, baby. You're fighting for all the invisible people who deserve to be seen. Kenya wiped her eyes and stood up, clutching the dictionary close to her heart. The evening session would begin in an hour, and she was ready to carry 3 generations of hope into the most important moment of her life. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a theater of international commerce. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables arranged with mathematical precision, each place setting worth more than Kenya's monthly salary. Representatives from 15 countries filled the ornate space, tech moguls from Silicon Valley, manufacturing titans from Germany, energy executives from the Middle East, and innovation leaders from across Asia. $200 million in potential partnerships hung in the balance. Kenya stood at the edge of the ballroom, still wearing her cleaning uniform but with a borrowed blazer from a kind Japanese executive's daughter. The contrast was jarring. Professional on top, service worker below, a visual metaphor for the invisible line she was about to cross permanently. 30 minutes before Mr. Chen's crucial presentation, the universe decided to test Kenya one final time. "The interpretation system just crashed," Stephanie announced, her voice barely controlled by panic. "Complete technical failure. The backup equipment won't arrive for 2 hours." David's face went ashen. Without real-time interpretation, the international investors would miss crucial details of Mr. Chen's technological integration proposals. Cultural nuances would be lost. The entire evening would collapse into expensive confusion. "Kenya," David said, his voice tight with desperation. "I know this is far beyond what we discussed, but would you be willing to provide live interpretation for Mr. Chen's presentation? For the entire room?" The scope of what he was asking hit Kenya like a physical force. This wasn't helping with basic translations during a casual business meeting. This was simultaneous interpretation for 200 of the world's most powerful business leaders, covering complex technological concepts, financial structures, and international law. One mistake could cost millions. One cultural misstep could destroy relationships built over decades. Stephanie's expression made her thoughts clear without words. This was insanity. Kenya looked out at the assembled delegates. German engineering executives discussing precision manufacturing. Korean tech leaders analyzing market penetration strategies. Arab oil executives calculating renewable energy transitions. Japanese investors evaluating blockchain applications. She thought about her grandmother's dictionary, about her mother's pride, about 3 generations of invisible women whose intelligence had never been properly recognized. "Give me 5 minutes to prepare," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The transformation that followed would become hotel legend. Mr. Chen began his presentation in Mandarin, outlining his company's vision for AI-integrated supply chain management across global markets. Kenya's voice followed seamlessly, translating not just words but meaning, context, and cultural significance. When a Korean delegate interrupted with a complex question about algorithmic bias in international trade applications, Kenya didn't miss a beat. She translated the question into Mandarin, provided cultural context to Mr. Chen about Korean business etiquette, then translated his response back into Korean using appropriate formal language that showed respect for the questioner's seniority. The room began to take notice. A German executive asked about regulatory compliance across EU markets. Kenya translated the technical legal terminology flawlessly, then added contextual notes about how different European countries approached data privacy laws. Her interpretation helped Mr. Chen tailor his response to address specific German concerns about technological sovereignty. But the moment that changed everything happened when a French delegate made a comment about efficiency optimization that carried unintended cultural implications in Mandarin business philosophy. Instead of translating literally, Kenya caught the potential offense and diplomatically reframed the concept as collaborative enhancement, preserving the French intent while respecting Chinese cultural sensitivities. Mr. Chen paused mid-sentence, recognizing what Kenya had just done. She hadn't just prevented a misunderstanding, she had demonstrated the kind of sophisticated cultural intelligence that even professional diplomats struggled to achieve. The room's attention shifted. International business leaders began focusing not just on Mr. Chen's words, but on Kenya's masterful facilitation of cross-cultural understanding. When an Arab oil executive asked about renewable energy integration timelines, Kenya seamlessly switched between Arabic, Mandarin, and English, incorporating cultural perspectives about long-term thinking that resonated with all 3 business traditions. A Japanese investor inquired about technological compatibility with existing systems. Kenya's response included appropriate Kigo honorifics, technical accuracy, and cultural sensitivity that made the executive smile with genuine appreciation. The presentation reached its climax when Mr. Chen announced his revolutionary blockchain platform for international trade verification. The concept was complex, involving cryptocurrency integration, cultural adaptation protocols, and regulatory compliance across 12 countries. Kenya translated the technical specifications flawlessly, but more importantly, she helped each delegation understand how the technology would respect their specific cultural and legal requirements. She wasn't just interpreting language, she was building bridges between entirely different ways of thinking about business, technology, and international cooperation. Then Mr. Chen did something unprecedented. He paused his presentation and turned to address the room directly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in English, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "I want you to meet Kenya Williams, who has just demonstrated something extraordinary. She has shown us that true expertise isn't determined by titles or uniforms, but by knowledge, skill, and cultural wisdom." The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. "Ms. Williams was working as a cleaning staff member 24 hours ago, Mr. Chen continued. Tonight, she has provided the most sophisticated cultural interpretation I have experienced in 20 years of international business. She has a PhD in applied linguistics from Columbia University, speaks 7 languages fluently, and understands cross-cultural communication at a level that most professional consultants never achieve." The room erupted. The standing ovation started with Mr. Chen, spread to the Asian delegations, then swept through the entire ballroom like a wave. German executives, French investors, Arab oil leaders, Korean tech moguls, all rising to applaud a woman who had been invisible to them hours earlier. Kenya stood frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of recognition washing over her. Every delegate in the room was seeing her, not her uniform, not her job title, but her actual capabilities and worth. Multiple executives approached her directly, business cards in hand, offering consulting positions, requesting her contact information, praising her cultural sensitivity and linguistic expertise. "Where can we hire someone like you?" a German engineering director asked. "Do you have a consulting firm?" inquired a Korean tech CEO. "We need this level of cultural intelligence for our Middle East operations," said an energy executive. Kenya maintained professional composure while internally processing the life-changing magnitude of what had just occurred. In less than 2 hours, she had transformed from invisible cleaning staff to the center of attention for global business leaders. Stephanie watched from the side of the room, her face a mixture of shock and the dawning realization that her prejudices had been exposed in front of the international business elite. David beamed with pride, knowing his decision to support Kenya had been validated in the most public way possible. But the evening wasn't over yet. The real test would come when the business deals were finalized and her future was decided permanently. As the delegates mingled after Mr. Chen's presentation, Kenya found herself in a surreal bubble of recognition and respect. Business cards pressed into her hands like confetti, each one representing opportunities that would have been unimaginable 24 hours earlier. Mr. Chen approached through the crowd, carrying a small red silk box that commanded immediate attention. The conversation around them quieted as other delegates sensed the significance of the moment. "Kenya," he said, speaking in English so everyone could understand, "I want you to know that what you accomplished tonight wasn't just professional excellence. It was cultural bridge building that will impact international relationships for years to come." He opened the silk box to reveal a traditional Chinese business seal, carved jade with her name etched in both English and Chinese characters. The gasps from nearby delegates were audible. Such seals were symbols of respect typically reserved for high-level business partners and honored colleagues. "This is a symbol of recognition from my company and our partners," Mr. Chen continued. "In Chinese business culture, we give these only to individuals who have earned our deepest professional respect." Kenya's hands trembled as she accepted the seal. The weight of it felt like validation of every invisible night, every sacrificed dream, every moment she had wondered if her talents would ever be seen. But Mr. Chen wasn't finished. I would also like to offer you a position as Vice President of International Cultural Relations with Chine Technologies, based in New York, with a starting salary of $120,000 annually. The number hit Kenya like lightning, more than 8 times her cleaning salary, enough to transform her family's life completely. Before she could respond, David Harrison stepped forward, his voice carrying across the nearby crowd. If I may interrupt, Mr. Chine, I believe Ms. Williams already has an offer pending. The hotel manager's timing was perfect. In front of the assembled international business leaders, he announced Kenya's promotion to Director of Cultural Affairs, with a salary of $85,000 and full benefits. However, David continued with a smile, given tonight's extraordinary demonstration of her capabilities, I believe we need to revisit those terms. A German executive stepped forward. If neither of those positions appeals to you, Frau Williams, Bayern Industries would be honored to have you lead our cultural integration department. We've been searching for someone with your expertise for 2 years. A Korean tech CEO added, SK Innovation has immediate openings for cross-cultural communication specialists. We could match any offer you receive. Kenya stood surrounded by opportunities that represented more than career advancement. They represented the recognition of worth that had been invisible for years. Then something even more meaningful happened. David called for the room's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we've witnessed something extraordinary. But this story isn't just about one person's talents being recognized. It's about examining our own assumptions about human potential. He gestured toward Kenya. 24 hours ago, every person in this room would have walked past Ms. Williams without a second thought. Not because she lacked capability, but because we've been trained to equate job titles with human worth. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the assembled business leaders. Tonight, the Grand Metropolitan Hotel is announcing the creation of the Hidden Talents Initiative, David continued. We will be identifying and developing exceptional capabilities among all our staff, regardless of their current positions. Ms. Williams will lead this program, ensuring that no one else's potential remains invisible. Spontaneous applause erupted again, but this time it felt different. Less about celebration and more about commitment to change. Mr. Chine raised his hand for silence. Chine Technologies would like to partner with this initiative by establishing the International Hidden Talents Scholarship Fund. We will provide $50,000 annually to support working students who demonstrate exceptional abilities despite challenging circumstances. A Japanese executive stepped forward. Yamaha Corporation will contribute matching funds and provide internship opportunities. The German representative added, Bayern Industries commits to implementing similar talent identification programs across our European operations. What had started as recognition for one person was transforming into a movement for systemic change. Kenya's mother and sister arrived at the hotel, invited by David to witness their daughter's moment of recognition. Seeing her family enter the ballroom, her mother moving slowly but with unmistakable pride, her teenage sister wide-eyed at the luxury surrounding them, nearly broke Kenya's composure entirely. Mr. Chine approached Kenya's mother directly, speaking with the respect he would show any dignitary. Mrs. Williams, your daughter has exceptional talents. You should be very proud. Kenya's mother, still weak from treatments but radiating dignity, replied, I always knew she was special. I just prayed someone else would see it too. The formal recognition ceremony was held in the same ballroom where Kenya had been invisible just hours earlier. The visual contrast was overwhelming. She now stood at the podium where she had once cleaned around the edges. David presented her with an official letter of appointment as Director of Cultural Affairs, along with a revised salary offer of $95,000, nearly matching Mr. Chine's corporate offer but allowing her to build the Hidden Talents program. Kenya approached the microphone, looking out at faces that now saw her as an equal rather than part of the furniture. She held up her cleaning uniform and her new business card side by side. My worth didn't change tonight, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. Only your perception did. The question we should all ask ourselves is, who else are we not seeing? Whose talents are we overlooking because we're focused on their uniforms instead of their capabilities? The room was silent, processing the challenge in her words. Every workplace has hidden talents waiting to be discovered. Every person deserves to be seen for their full potential, not just their current circumstances. She placed her grandmother's worn dictionary on the podium. This dictionary traveled with me for 3 years in my cleaning cart. It represents the dreams that were deferred but never abandoned. Tonight, it also represents the promise that talent will be recognized, regardless of where it's found. The standing ovation that followed lasted 3 full minutes, a recognition not just of Kenya's individual triumph, but of the possibility for systemic change that her story represented. As the evening concluded, Kenya stood surrounded by new opportunities, holding her jade business seal and watching her mother beam with pride. 3 generations of dreams had finally been validated. The transformation was complete, but more importantly, it was just the beginning. 6 months later, Kenya Williams stood in the same marble lobby where her journey began. But everything had changed. The cleaning cart was gone, replaced by a mahogany desk bearing a nameplate that read Director of Cultural Affairs. The space had been converted into a welcome center for international guests, with flags from 30 countries and cultural information displays in 12 languages. Her personal transformation was remarkable, but the ripple effects were even more extraordinary. The Hidden Talents Initiative had identified 47 employees across the hotel chain whose capabilities far exceeded their job descriptions. Maria Santos, a night janitor who spoke 4 languages and held a master's degree in international relations, was now the hotel's Latin American cultural specialist. James Park, a maintenance worker with an engineering degree, had been promoted to Facilities Innovation Manager. Sarah Al-Mansouri, a housekeeper with a background in hospitality management, was now Training Director for Cultural Sensitivity. Kenya's own success had multiplied beyond recognition. Her cultural consulting firm, Bridge Communications, employed 12 people and served multinational corporations across 3 continents. The company's waiting list extended 6 months, and Kenya had been featured on the covers of Harvard Business Review and International Business Weekly. But perhaps the most meaningful change was happening in her family. Kenya's mother sat in the oncology waiting room, no longer worried about treatment costs. Her latest scans showed no trace of cancer, a medical miracle made possible by the best health care that adequate insurance could provide. The doctors say stress reduction played a major role in my recovery, she told Kenya during their weekly lunch. Knowing our financial struggles are over, let my body focus on healing. Kenya's sister had graduated valedictorian from high school and was now a freshman at Columbia University on a full scholarship, studying applied linguistics, following in her sister's footsteps, but with the support their family had never been able to provide before. The jade business seal from Mr. Chine sat prominently on Kenya's desk, but it was joined by awards from the United Nations for Cross-Cultural Communication Excellence, recognition from the International Chamber of Commerce, and letters from dozens of former invisible employees whose talents had been discovered through programs Kenya had helped design. Mr. Chine had become more than a business contact. He was a friend and mentor. Their partnership had facilitated trade agreements worth over $2 billion, proving that authentic cultural understanding could literally change economies. You didn't just save my conference that night, he told Kenya during their quarterly strategy meeting. You showed me what happens when we truly see people. David Harrison had been promoted to regional director, largely based on the success of the Hidden Talents Initiative. Stephanie Martinez had undergone a complete transformation as well, becoming one of the program's most effective advocates after recognizing how her own prejudices had nearly cost the hotel its biggest opportunity. The movement Kenya had helped start was spreading across industries. Major corporations from technology to manufacturing were implementing talent identification programs specifically designed to look beyond job titles and uniforms. Universities were creating scholarships for working students. Policymakers were drafting legislation to prevent employment discrimination based on current job status rather than capability. But Kenya's proudest moment came during a return visit to Columbia University, where she was invited to speak to current linguistics students. Standing in the same lecture hall where she had once dreamed of her future, she looked out at eager faces and shared a different kind of wisdom. Sometimes the most valuable education happens outside these walls, she told them. In the real interactions between cultures, in the moments when you choose to see people fully rather than partially. Don't just study languages, live them. Don't just learn about cultures, bridge them. After her presentation, a young student approached her. "Professor Williams," she said, "I work nights at a restaurant to pay for school. Sometimes I feel invisible, like customers see my apron but not my potential. Your story gives me hope." Kenya smiled, remembering the weight of invisibility and the power of being truly seen. "Keep studying," she said. "Keep believing in your worth. Your moment will come, and when it does, you'll be ready." The full circle was complete, but the impact continued expanding. Today, thousands of people work in positions that match their true capabilities rather than their circumstances, thanks to programs inspired by Kenya's story. The question, "Who else are we not seeing?" has become a standard part of hiring and promotion discussions in companies worldwide. Think about the people who serve you every day: your barista, your security guard, your delivery driver, your cleaning staff. Behind their uniforms might be hidden PhDs, linguistic experts, innovative thinkers, or creative geniuses waiting for someone to look beyond the surface. The next time someone serves you, look them in the eyes. See them as a complete human being with dreams, talents, and potential. Ask about their background, their interests, their goals. You might discover that the person you've been overlooking possesses exactly the expertise you've been searching for. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that their current situation doesn't define their worth. Comment below about a time when someone's hidden talents surprised you. Let's create a community that actively looks for and celebrates human potential wherever we find it. Because talent isn't rare, recognition is. Your worth isn't determined by your uniform, but by your character, knowledge, and heart.